We come together so that we may honor Beverly in our hearts and hold her dear in our memory. So I'm going to invite grandchildren Ben, Alex, and Sydney forward to light our chalice. In this hour of holy stillness, we gather to honor the life and the person we love. In this hour of holy stillness, we remind ourselves that the flames of life and love are never fully extinguished. In this hour of holy stillness, we offer ourselves for the sharing the weight of each other's grief. In this hour of holy stillness, we offer the strength of our love to help others survive their pain and grief. In this hour of holy stillness, we call forth from each of us the power we offer out of life, out of loss, out of love. Mark?
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of our family, I'd like to thank you all for being here today. The last few months have been difficult watching our mother decline, but looking out at all of you and seeing how many people cared about her, you remind us of how truly special she was. To those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Seavey, and I'm the oldest of Bev and Forrest children. My sisters and I are hoping that as we gather here today, we can share stories and create new memories about our mother. We see this as an opportunity to affirm how truly special she was. So on that note, I'd like to share a story that many of you can relate to, her Christmas cookies. My mother started the tradition of baking cookies back in the early 70s with just a few types to be shared and enjoyed by friends and family. As the years passed, her Christmas cookie menu grew to over 15 different types, and each September, she would start baking, and as she finished a batch, she would place them in the freezer labeled liver. By around this time each year, with quite a few cookies in the freezer, we would begin to forage. So her practice of making cookies for families and friends grew into two traditions. She would bake them, and we would steal them. Several people here today were kind enough to make some of her favorite cookies so we could share them here with you. But I gotta say, after 40 years of tradition, I really do prefer them frozen. But they're also good at room temperature, so I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Please join me as we open our service together with a hymn, Spirit of Life, which is in this hymnal, and it has the easy number of 1, 2, 3. So please stand as you like and are able. After years of gradually losing Bev, after the longest goodbye, my hope is that you are able now to reach back and remember her as she was before Alzheimer's began to take her away. No doubt grief has come in stages through these years of her illness, but death is the final letting go. Death after a long decline can bring simultaneous emotions of both relief and grief. Loss, guilt, and relief may be held together in the complex way that we mourn. Though our grief is strong and we must mourn, we will not let the shadow of death obscure the living person who touched you in many ways, filling your life with memories, meaning, and love. Let us be wise enough and let us be brave enough this afternoon to honestly remember a human life. A life that was Beverly's life. So today, we celebrate the way she lived. Let's make a ritual worthy of her whole life. We are living evidence of Bev's presence still among us. Today, we honor and hold reverent the support of those who cared for Bev and the gift of intimate relationship they received. Let us honor and hold reverent the love shared between Bev and Forrest through their years together. Let us honor her children, Deb, Jennifer, and Mark, who have blessed the world with the gifts they have inherited from their mother. Let us honor and hold reverent the presence of grandchildren, Ben, Alex, and Sydney, as they are the living testament in the world of Bev and Forrest's love. And so it is good and right and fitting that we have come together, because a human life is sacred in its being born, in its living, and in its dying. Out of our memories and unending affections flow a thanksgiving. In our gathered concerns and compassion, healing begins. Let the gifts of courage, wisdom, and thanksgiving come to each of us now and grow among us today and in the days to come. Courage to face Bev's loss, wisdom to speak openly and honestly about our loss, and deep, deep gratitude for Bev's life. May it be so. I'm mixed up. Yes.
In January 1995, my husband Jerry and I were living near Kobe, Japan with our two sons, Ben, who was almost 3, and Alex, who was only 6 weeks old, when the Kobe earthquake struck. Our town was devastated. The elevated freeway fell over, houses collapsed, and many people were killed. After realizing that we would have no heat or running water for months, we decided that we could not stay in our house there. So I called my mom. The phone lines were down and we were having a hard time making local calls, but somehow my international call went through. I think it was around 2 a.m. in Reading, but my mom swung into action, getting us flight reservations from Japan back to Boston. And so Ben, Alex, and I came to stay with my mom and dad for almost 3 months, showing up with only what we could carry as we walked from our house to the nearest working train station 7 miles away. Mom's network buzzed, and borrowed car seats, high chairs, clothes, and baby necessities materialized. In addition to working full-time, my mom took on childcare duties, helping with feeding, bathing, and putting the kids to bed. She almost magically found a spot in a local preschool for Ben, and also organized his 3rd birthday party with my cousins, aunt, and uncle. I was feeling the trauma and stress after the earthquake and from sleep deprivation from having a jet-lagged newborn. I was incredibly thankful to have this safe haven in which my children and I were nurtured and taken care of. Not everyone has a place to go. Not everyone has a place to go where they feel safe and nurtured, and I'm so grateful to have had that gift. As I reflect on my mom's life, I realize that I'm not the only one for whom my mom created a safe space to be nurtured and loved. Of course, the list includes family members, her younger sister, her children and grandchildren, but there are others as well. She helped expand, relocate, and renovate the public library in Reading, creating a welcoming space for families and readers. She worked with survivors of domestic violence here in Plymouth to ensure they had shelter and support. And as part of the building committee here at Star King Fellowship, she helped expand this building as well. My mom looked out at the world and saw a need, and she responded and worked to create spaces where people could be safe, supported, and loved. For that, I am incredibly grateful. Grateful both to have received that nurturing and also to have had such an amazing role model for putting compassion into action. One of my fondest memories from my childhood is my mom reading poetry to my siblings and me. At bedtime, she would read from A.A. Milne's When We Were Very Young, and Now We Are 6. I can still recite portions of those poems by heart, as I'm sure some of you can as well. And later, she would read these same poems and others to her grandchildren. She found much solace and a haven from the trouble of the world in nature, as this poem, Peace of Wild Things, by Wendell Berry describes. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars, waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
There's already some amazing consistency in what my brother and my sister have shared already, which is pretty awesome. So I'm Jennifer Seavey, and this right here is the book of my mom's Christmas recipes, the cookies. It's mine. No. And I have made a copy of this for my family and shared it with them. I have heard that the plate of this cookies used to go at an auction at this fellowship for around $50. And I wonder what this book might be worth. But the thing about these cookies, and my brothers talked about them, I know they're gonna come up again, because they're magic. My mom sprinkled them with fairy mom dust, and they're way more than delicious sugar bombs. They were about what mattered most to her. They were about family, they were about community, her friends, trying to make the world a better place, one piece of sugar cookie at a time. My mom was a very enthusiastic and accomplished creator of so many things in her life through her role as mother, wife, advocate for women, engaged citizen, and community builder. From my vantage point, my mother was a wife who was in it for real. She was committed to a partnership focused on respect, kindness, reliability, especially love. As Gibran aptly described, the kind of love my parents had was a moving sea between the shores of their souls. This is surely the kind of love that's going to last way beyond this earthly life. For me, my mom, along with my dad, created a childhood that was wrapped in stability, safety, and reliability, all beautifully garnished with a passion for curiosity and responsibility for the world around us. From reading classic literature to us in the car on epic family road trips, to stopping and pointing out delicate wildflowers by name in the woods, to making a big stinking deal of cooking mackerel that I just caught off of a dock, while all the while remembering my brother definitely doesn't want to eat fish and has to have a hamburger for him, to steering our kid-fueled energy to knock on a million doors for her political campaigns or for some fundraiser from a community event. She built this family with strong traditions, a space for us to be ourselves, and a sense of responsibility for making contributions to our own communities. My mom was definitely a champion of her own communities and a great role model. She, as my sister said, helped to build a public library in the town where we grew up. She promoted political engagement, especially among women. She ran for public office. She marched in Washington to protect women's rights. All of this she did while she was working a full-time job and raising 3 kids. When she retired and moved to New Hampshire, she dedicated herself to helping women, as Deb said, and their children find really safe, secure places and to rebuild their lives after domestic violence. She helped steward the creation of this very building that we're in right now, so that Star King could continue to grow and be a place that she loved, a place where people could feel welcome and nourished enough to be able to turn out and do good things for the community. So I started with this cookbook, and over the last couple weeks, I've been really studying it. I've noticed these careful notes on the margins, changing recipes to be exactly, what worked for her. She had a year, there's a page for every year she made the cookies with the dates and what she made on that date. She was consistent. She was persistent. Every year, she built and carefully created what she was passionate about and what she believed in. It's love and passion and joy, her own, and that she inspired in others, for a life with meaning and joy and purpose. And I'm so grateful that she is my mom, and very proud of that. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'd like to share a story, a fairy tale actually, with all of you. Once upon a time, some years ago, there lived 3 fairies right within the Scuff community. Scuff was smaller then and didn't have much money for building maintenance or much of anything at that point. That was all done by volunteers. Grass mowing, window washing, vacuuming, dusting, cleaning bathrooms, you name it, we did it. All the tasks that kept Scuff attractive and welcoming. Now the kitchen was what is presently the coat room, that little bitty place out there. And coffee session was held in the foyer where you all came in today. You can understand how difficult it was to thoroughly clean on Sundays with people and children running all around. One Sunday, these 3 families, one short and kind of chunky, one tall and very agile, and one taller and thin and very smart, and very organized. Noticed the kitchen was looking a bit dingy and the foyer cluttered. So they decided to come in during the week when no one was here and give these two spaces a thorough cleaning. They got an organization going, set up a monthly schedule, so began their work. They were good friends and worked well together and had fun. People began to notice how clean and organized the kitchen and foyer looked, and of course wondered how this was all happening. During coffee session one Sunday, someone, perhaps a fairy, speculated that magic was in the air. Maybe there were kitchen fairies working their magic. Of course, they said, it had to be magic. Well, it's fun to believe in magic, but the kitchen fairies knew the time was ripe for reality. So the tall, thin, very smart, very organized one began to talk with folks about perhaps these kitchen fairies had other work to do. And maybe Scuff should set up a monthly cleaning schedule. You know, even fairies can tire. And that was what happened. This very smart, very organized fairy recruited people, set up a schedule, organized the tasks, typed it all up, printed it, and posted it in the kitchen. The kitchen fairies could return from kitchen cleaning and put their magic to work in other areas of Scuff's life. Now, our fairy tale is almost finished, but perhaps you've guessed the name of at least one of these fairies. But now I'll tell you all their names. The short, kind of chunky one was me. The tall, agile one was Gail. Gail was agile because she used to actually crawl up on top of the kitchen cabinets to clean the top of the kitchen cabinets. Agile. And the very smart, very organized, and I'm adding this, very loved, was Bev. Now, some of this is made up on my part. Scuffers are too pragmatic to believe in magic. But what wasn't made up was the love Bev gave to this community. And this is true. Scuff misses her. I miss her.
Laura, Mark, Debbie, Jen, Marsha, everybody, hi. I was 4 years old when Bev joined our family, thereby usurping my role as only child. But we became good friends, and through that friendship, I have lots of memories. And I'd like to share the first 5 that popped into my head. Bev was not quite 30 months old when the hurricane of '38 swept into town. It was worse than the storm this week. The wind roared, the rain poured, the leaves flew, the limbs fell, and Dad was not home. It was scary, really scary. And Bev and Mom and I huddled in the house and waited anxiously for Dad to come home. And when he drove down the driveway, Bev dashed out to greet him, much to the dismay of Mom, who was sure she was going to be blown away. But Bev was well grounded even back then, and all was well. 4 years later, September 1942, we just moved to Fayetteville, North Carolina, as Dad was in the Army Air Corps, stationed at Fort Bragg. And one Saturday, Bev and I went to a matinee at the Hammond Theater to see Tarzan's New York Adventure. We got there before the box office opened. And there were quite a few kids milling around, chatting. And we could not understand a word they were saying. Now, perhaps they couldn't understand our Boston accent, but we sure could not understand their southern drawl. Well, the next week, school began, and Bev was going into the first grade in this strange place occupied by people who spoke in a strange tongue. This may have been the reason why, maybe not, but in any event, Bev decided not to go to school. And she spent the first day of school in the doghouse in the backyard. The next day and thereafter, she did go to school, perhaps preferring the school to the doghouse and all those icky spiders. Moving on, Bev is in high school, and she and Forrest are dating. Remember dating? That was something people did back then. Well, one day, Forrest suggested that they spend the day at the Seavey camp. It was on a lake, someplace in New Hampshire. Well, Dad wasn't terribly keen about that. But he finally said it would be okay as long as they had a chaperone. And I was selected to be the chaperone. I wasn't happy about that, and I suspect Forrest and Bev were not happy about that. But they were nice to me. When we got to the camp, they made sure that I was comfortable in a chair on the porch, looking out over the lake. And they didn't wake me up until it was time to go. I wonder what they did. A few years later, I hadn't been home for quite a while, 4 years in the Navy, 1 year in graduate school. But I was home for the summer. And Dad seemed to be concerned that I didn't have a girlfriend. And he discussed this deeply personal problem with Bev. And she said, "I'll take care of it." And she did. And I have been and will forever be grateful to her for having done that. And I think there's others in this room that probably feel the same way. Now, for the last glimpse, go back in time to when Bev was 5 years old. And one day, one afternoon, she was down the street playing with some of her friends. And when it was time to come home, we could hear her marching up Fairmont Avenue, yelling at the top of her lungs, "Is I happy? Is I happy? Is I happy?" Well, Bev was happy at 5, happy at 10, 15, so on, at 70 and 75. And I've been told that when Bev was told about the dreadful consequences of her terrible disease, she said, "I don't know what's going to happen, but I want to be happy." And I'm sure she was. I'm sure she was.
When the
this time, we will take the opportunity for some personal remembrances. So I invite those of you who wish to share something of what it has meant for you to experience Bev's companionship or her wisdom or humor or encouragement in your own lives to share. You may wish to share a memory or say something about how your life has been enriched by Bev. And in this way, those of you who have known her make her present among us. I encourage you to be mindful of the time, dear ones, so that there will be time for several people to speak. And as you stand at this microphone, you can just adjust it to your height. And also, if there's time between speakers, let's just take that time to nourish a silent memory or to offer gratitude for Bev's life. There we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us to celebrate Bev's life. For those of you that don't know me, for the last 20 years, I've had the honor of being Bev's daughter-in-law. My husband, Mark, called her my mother. My daughter, Sydney, called her grandma. And for the last 20 years, I've called her Mom. Over the last 2 weeks since Mom's passing, I have spent endless hours thinking about what I wanted to tell you about her. There's so many wonderful stories to share. I wanted to make sure I picked one that not only left you with a warm feeling in your heart and a smile on your face, but also gave you a sense of who she was. So I decided to start at the beginning, and you'll notice there's a theme here. Our first Christmas together. Growing up in my house, gifts, any gifts, were always wrapped elaborately. The outside of the gift was just as important as what was inside. And that first Christmas, I labored over not only picking the first gift for my future in-laws, but also creating a beautiful presentation that screamed Christmas without being tacky. Mark and I left Boston late in the evening and headed up to New Hampshire to spend my first holiday with the family. When we arrived, I carefully laid out my gifts under the tree and took a moment to admire my handiwork. I was pleased with my presentation. I believe it set the perfect tone and emphasized how grateful and happy I was to be a part of this family. Off to bed we went. We got up the next morning to fanfare like I had never seen before. For those of you that don't know, I'm Jewish, so we don't celebrate Christmas. The Seavey family had a routine, and that needed to be followed before we could get to presents. So we roamed from bedroom to bedroom, opening stockings that were filled with treats that I'm sure Mom spent months picking out, treats that were specific and special for each of us. Finally, it was time to open presents, and the anticipation was killing me. I couldn't wait for her to rip into that wrapping with wild abandon and get to the gift that was inside. Imagine my surprise when she carefully pulled at the tape and gently removed the paper so as not to rip it. Then, before she even touched her gift, she placed the paper off to the side to ensure it could be and would be used again next year. Yes, friends, she was a wrapping paper recycler. Who knew such people existed? Certainly not me. So imagine her dismay when I did just that. We both knew at that moment that we were completely opposite on this subject, because I ripped through that paper like nothing you'd ever seen before. In my family, unwrapping gifts always turned into a frenzy of bits of flying paper. The following Christmas, I once again showed up with my elaborately wrapped gifts ready to be savored and enjoyed. And there, under the tree, were presents for everyone, wrapped in the paper I had painstakingly picked out the previous year, except for mine. My presents were wrapped in the oldest paper she could find. The paper that was finally ready to be retired. No way was she going to let me at that paper that was new. For us opposites, this worked out perfectly. I supplied her with new paper every year, and she gave me the old stuff to rip apart to my heart's content. It was how we showed each other that we respected and appreciated our differences. I don't think I'll ever be able to open a gift again without thinking about Mom and whether I should save the paper and use it again next year. I will miss her slowly opening presents so as not to rip the paper that should, no would, be used again. On behalf of our family, I'd like to take this opportunity to invite you up to share your favorite stories about this intelligent, loving, compassionate, unique woman I had the privilege and honor of calling Mom for almost 20 years. Rest in peace, Mom. At this time, I'd like to invite my nephew Ben up to say a few words and share a very special letter.
Hi. When I was 14, my grandma and grandpa took me to Finland to visit Lisa from Finland. Lisa was a foreign exchange student who had lived with the Seavey family in the late 70s. And I had never met Lisa before, but the minute we got there, I could see that this bond between Lisa and Forrest and Beverly across decades and thousands of miles, and it was something I'll never forget. So Lisa sent along a letter, and she's very different from the woman she was when she was a foreign exchange student. She's now a vice president of corporate affairs at Snebrikov, which is a big Finnish brewery. She has a Finnish artist husband. They live in this lovely house in Espoo outside of Helsinki. So I wanted to read this letter from her. Dear Forrest, Mark, Debbie, and Jennifer, my husband Bjorn Vekstrom and I are thinking of you and sending our deepest condolences as you are having memorial service for Beverly. We are saddened that she is not with us anymore. Beverly was my American mom, who together with you, Forrest, my American dad, and with you, Mark, Debbie, and Jennifer, welcomed me open-heartedly to be part of the Seavey family in the end of the 1970s. Ever since that, Beverly and you have been part of me and my life. I loved Beverly dearly. I am thankful that our roads crossed and that I got her support for almost 40 years, although most of the time we were thousands of miles apart from each other. I always felt that she cared for me and hoped that life would be good to me. Beverly was, for me, a role model of an independent, intelligent, loving, and caring woman, and a lot more. Without her, I would not be what I am today. I miss Beverly. With love, Lisa from Finland. I also wanted to tell a quick story from my own life. When my wife Sarah and I were dating, we went up to Romney to go rock climbing. And being a good grandson, I called Forrest and Beverly and asked them if I could come have dinner with them. And being a good grandmother, of course, Grandma Seavey said yes, even though, of course, I gave them no warning at all. I just, hey, we're like 15 minutes away, can I come over for dinner? And Grandma Seavey had made her famous to me fish chowder, seafood chowder that my mom now makes. And at the time, Sarah was a very picky eater. She's not anymore, but she was at the time. And she, of course, wanted to be very polite. And so she ate, even though she hated fish, she hated all forms of seafood, she ate the seafood chowder anyway. And it was so good that since then, Sarah has eaten fish.
I may turn around and go back and sit down. I'm Beverly's sister. We live in North Carolina on the coast. And I think it's really safe to say that everyone here has benefited from knowing Beverly. Forrest was her love and her partner for over 60 years. And our brother David was there for all of her life. And she guided me, she encouraged me, and she helped me all of my life. When I was born, Beverly had to share her bedroom with me. She was 11, and she had to share her room with me. But my very earliest memory is of Beverly. And she was a preteen, and she was standing in front of her mirror, and she was pinning up her hair, and I was behind her, standing in my crib, and there she was, making faces at me and amusing me. Well, do you people remember when televisions came in cabinets? And you had to open them up, and they were very special, and they were a piece of the furniture of the living rooms in the 50s. Well, then I found out that Beverly and Forrest were going to be married, and I was not happy. So in my childish hopes that if I did something, that my parents would ground her, would stop this marriage. And so I carved her name on the television cabinet. It didn't work. I have just one more quick snapshot for you. One summer, Forrest and Beverly came down to Wilmington to visit with us, and we went out to the beach. And I was in my 50s, so therefore Beverly was in her early 60s, somewhere around there. And we're out in the water, and the waves are huge, but we've waded out, and suddenly we decide we better turn around and come back to shore. And so we come back, and we glance over our shoulder, and there's one more humongous wave that's coming. And Beverly grabs my arm, and she says, "It will be all right." That was my sister.
Hi, I'm Jerry Howard. I'm the son-in-law and Deb's husband. Boy, I didn't realize how big a group it is here. What a testament to Bev. So in about April of 1983, a classmate of mine, Doug Belden, and I were talking about living together in Washington, D.C. And we were actually going to rent an apartment from my aunt. I'm from Virginia, so I say aunt, sorry. But it was a 3-bedroom apartment, and we needed a third. And so we talked to each other, well, who's going to be on engineering co-op in Washington? Who's going to be in Washington this summer? And both of us were good friends with this, beautiful, tall, brilliant, blonde Deb. Doug had actually dated Deb before. I was the friend, so we thought it would be unthreatening for me. I could just call and suggest maybe she could be our third roommate, and we would do the Three's Company thing, except in reverse. So I called Deb, I got a hold of her, and she sounded kind of interested, and and I think in the back of my head, I thought, well, this could be interesting. This could be maybe the beginning of something. And she said, look, I've got to go talk this over with my folks, and particularly my mom. And so I said, okay, it was spring break, so I said, I'll call you in a couple of days. And I called her back, and I said, well, what's the verdict? And she said, well, I sat down with my mom, and I said, look, I know these guys, and they're classmates of mine, and they're really nice guys. They're good guys. And you know what my mom said? Those are the worst kind. And the thing is, I don't think that I ever fully embraced how right she was. Because by the end of the summer, Deb and I were an item, and 35 plus years later, we've been married 28 years now. So that's my story.
I'm not on the program, but I thought it would be nice to hear from the non-Wakefield Burtons, as we are known on the other side of the family. For those of you who don't know, There were 4 brothers, Ambrose, George, Harry, and Harold. Ambrose was Bev's dad. Harold is mine. I grew up quite lonely because I was a liberal in the Burton household. And when Bev moved to New Hampshire, I'd become an activist, as my wife Betsy has. And Bev called. She said, I just want you to let you know, I'm in New Hampshire. We'd love to get together sometime. I said, it'd be great. She said, I know you've been active in politics. I'm in the legislature and all that sort of thing. But I just want you to know that I'm a Democrat too. And I was so grateful that in a great family. I don't know, I'd love to ask Jen and Deb and others how that came about. I think she did it all by herself. She was an amazing woman, and she's raised 2 incredible daughters. I've come to know both of them more recently. Jen, all by herself, revitalized the Shoals Marine Lab. Deb led the gun safety movement in New Hampshire. She was a force in the legislature. She would not relent until she got her hearing, and she was wonderful. And they're both incredible activists, of whom Beverly, I'm sure, is extremely proud, as we all are in the Burton family. And I thank you for the opportunity to say that.
I will be brief. I have a reputation here. My name is Betty Trott, and I am a member of this fellowship. About 15 years ago, so we're jumping way ahead, I had the opportunity to meet Bev. My husband and I came to a April Fool's Day service at this congregation. And my husband is a physician, and I'm a nurse, and we had been very active in our prior lives, and we're looking at retirement. So at that particular service, my husband gave me a jab and said, we found our home. I was like, okay. I'm laughing too. They are kind of strange people. We fit in here. and as we moved around, Bev and Janet and several other people came up to talk to me. And Bev and I found we had a lot in common. We had both been presidents of League of Women Voters. We had both been politically active and done lots of things. And I was taking over the League of Women Voters in the Upper Valley. So she had lots of advice. And she was very active in this. And the recycling just talked to me because my son had started a sustainable education farm up here in New Hampshire on some family property. And Bev was so excited, and she wanted to hear him speak. And we went through all of these things, and it was like I could come here. She was a someone among many others who I could sync with. So I thank Bev and Forrest for providing me with a welcome to a congregation that has become very, very important in my life.
I'm Mark Curley. I'm from Wakefield, Mass. And I was lucky. In 1977, I had the opportunity to meet Forrest Seavey. He had an office on Yale Avenue. He was an eye doctor. And my brother and I had a law office right next to Forrest. And Forrest, you're in here somewhere. I haven't been able to see you. Where is Forrest? Oh, Forrest. Oh, God. So I got to meet Forrest that way. And he introduced me to the Lions Club in Wakefield, and I got active in that with him. And so it's 40 years now. Here we are, 17. I've known Forrest and Beverly, and my wife Jackie. We got to know them, and It's been a great friendship for us. Forrest introduced me to a lot of different things. Camping. He showed me his pop-up tent trailer before he got into, after he got out of the tent, he got into things like that. And we got a pop-up tent trailer. He told us where to go camping. He suggested different places, from Hermit Island to other places around New England and out in the Canadian Rockies. I think he told us to go out there. He was always about 10 years ahead of me, and we kind of followed what he did. He had great ideas, he and Beverly. And as it turned out, we all had a lot in common. He and Beverly and Jackie and I. We liked the outdoors. And I ski, Jackie skis, Beverly skied, Forrest skied. We skied together. Beverly introduced us to snowshoeing. I had never done it before, up at their house. We used to come up and visit them when we were skiing. I did not downhill ski with Beverly, I don't think, Forrest, but Forrest and I have skied a lot together. We did a lot of bicycling together. Forrest, remember the trips to Martha's Vineyard, Block Island, you and Beverly? We did a lot. Great times, 40 years. We were so lucky to do that. And then we enjoyed your beautiful home just down the road. And Beverly, what a cook. She was a gourmet cook. And I started getting into cooking about 30 years ago. And she'd give me her recipe. She was extremely organized. All her recipes were not only in this little book you got, Jennifer, but it was all on her computer, and I was so impressed. She'd pump out a recipe for me, and of course at the top, BBS, and and then it would have the recipe. So my cookbook at home has a lot of your mother's recipes in it with her initials at the top. Really great. So she had a lot of love for family. When we would go up there, she would talk all about her children, her lovely grandchildren, and I'm grateful to have known her. The one thing I got to mention, I've heard that you heard she was employed. Behind every great man, there's a great woman. Forrest was my eye doctor. He was in the back room. When he got done with me, Beverly took care of me. She was great. I had to get the right frames. And it takes a woman to choose the frame. and she was really good. No, Mark, I don't think that's right. Try this one, this one. And whatever she put on me, I walked out. They were the best pair of eyeglasses I could get, and they looked great. So for many decades, Beverly took care of my eyes. Not you, Forrest. So your legacy are your children and your grandchildren. I heard that earlier, and I think that's absolutely correct. That's what we leave behind. And so I'm delighted to be here to express my condolences. And we had a wonderful friendship, and we'll always remember that. Thank you.
You cannot have a 60-year friendship with a family and not have way too much to say. But I promise I'll try not to say way too much. There is a chapter of the cookie story. You see, Beverly did get tired of making so many cookies. And she thought perhaps she should cut down. So she took a vote among her family. She said, please list your favorite cookie. You know what happened. They got together. They discussed this. And they each wrote down a different favorite cookie. I also had the privilege of knowing Bev and Forrest as camping friends, and Bev was never still. Now, we had no telephones in the campsite. We did not know what cell phones were. And Beverly and Forrest would arrive, and they'd say, "Sally, we're going to bike up to Waterville Valley." Now, for those of you who live here, biking down from Waterville Valley is no problem. Biking up to Waterville Valley, I said, "Beverly, I can't do that. We need to take 2 cars. We'll put one in the valley, and we'll have one here at our site, and we'll ride down from Waterville Valley." Oh, no. We rode up. And we coasted back down, no problem. She did this one other time to me. She said, "Today we're going to bike the trail at the basin. That is also an uphill, downhill." But I was ready, and I said, 2 cars. She said, "Okay, Sally, 2 cars." Further entertaining the Seaveys, they came to our campsite every single summer as a family. The boys were little, and today when I saw them, I have to say, nothing has changed. They're bigger, but they look just the same. I could just hug them, take them both home. At one of those campfires, they had come back from that terrible situation in Japan. And I said to Ben, "Ben, can you sing Happy Birthday in Japanese?" Because he had some Japanese words, which he was entertaining us with. He looked at me kind of strange, and he said, "Well, I don't know." And his mother said, go ahead. Out of Ben's mouth came, "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you." He indeed, that was his Japanese rendition of Happy Birthday. Now, you all heard Bev was a wonderful cook. I have to tell you, not always. We went walking up to Depot Camp, for those of you who live here, and Bev saw the fiddleheads, and she said, "Oh, fiddleheads, have you ever had them?" I said, "No." "Well, we're going to have them tonight with dinner." So we picked the fiddleheads, Jennifer, and we cooked the fiddleheads. Oh, they were awful. Now, probably you have a better recipe, but anyway, that's what we had. Beverly arrived one night with 4 bottles, half empty, of wine. And she said, "We're having a campfire, and I need to get rid of this wine." So we sat there and we drank 4 different kinds of wine, and we still had some left. So I poured it out. Beverly said, "You can't save it anymore." I poured it out in the bushes, and off they went. That wine did not go away. It smelled in the morning. It smelled on the next weekend. I had to dig the dirt away to get rid of this wine. Maybe it's still there. Maybe you'd like to check it out. One more comment would be that Ben did teach me something besides Happy Birthday. He was making a salad with me at my campsite, and he was putting the lettuce in the bowl, and he said, "You know, Sally, iceberg lettuce has absolutely no nutritional value." I never put lettuce in a bowl that I don't think about that. It's like a guilt trip. We knew the Seaveys. in a social, outdoor way. And Beverly never let us grow old. And Forrest has known my husband since grammar school. I'm afraid my husband's growing old, but I'm not. Thank you for listening.
With tears and laughter, we dip into the deep well of love and memory. Thank you for sharing. May these memories and those that remain unspoken nourish you and keep Bev's spirit with you. So join me for a closing hymn. Let's sing together again in this great hymnal, number 108, My Life Flows On. And please stand as you like and are able. Spirit of life, be with us, giving us the peace of acceptance and understanding, and the assurance in those things that never die, those things that pass from person to person, through generations into eternity, especially love. In the spirit of love we have gathered, and in the spirit of love we depart. May it be so. Please join us after the service for Christmas cookies and other treats at the back of the fellowship hall. Thank you for coming.